My name is Mia Jones, and I'm 15 years old. I live with my mom, Laura, my stepdad, David, and my younger half-siblings, Emma and Noah. My dad, Mark Jones, passed away when I was 6. A year later, my mom met David, and by the time I was 7, they were together. They got married a couple of years after that, and my mom changed her last name to Smith, taking David's. I like David. He's a good guy, and I see that he makes my mom happy. I don't have issues with him or my half-siblings. I actually have a good relationship with them. We all get along, and for the most part, our family life is pretty normal. But there's always been one thing that's bothered me. Something that keeps coming up no matter how many times I try to correct it. My last name is Jones. It was my dad's last name, and it's mine. When my mom married David, she and David asked if I wanted to take his last name. They even mentioned adoption. I said no. I wasn't interested. It wasn't anything personal against David. I just wanted to keep my name. They said they understood, and that was the end of it. Or at least I thought it was. Over the years, my mom has started referring to me as Mia Smith instead of Mia Jones. It started small, like when she'd introduce me to someone and casually say, "This is my daughter, Mia Smith." At first, I thought it was just a slip-up, but then it kept happening. Sometimes she'd fill out forms or RSVPs and put me down as Mia Smith. I corrected her a few times, but she brushed it off, saying it wasn't a big deal. It didn't seem like something worth fighting over, so I let it go. But over time, it started to feel like my mom wasn't just making mistakes. She was deliberately trying to change something about me that I had already made clear I wanted to keep. When I was 13, I found out something that changed how I saw my parents' relationship. Until then, I had always believed my mom and dad were happy together before he passed. But I overheard a conversation between my aunt and grandmother that made me question everything. They were talking about how my mom and dad were on the brink of divorce before he died. My mom hadn't been happy with him for a long time, and their marriage was falling apart. When he passed, she moved on quickly because, in a way, she had already emotionally left the relationship. I didn't know how to process that. I never had the chance to see my parents' marriage for what it really was. To me, they were just mom and dad, together. Learning that they were about to separate made me feel like a part of my life had been rewritten without me knowing. It also explained why my mom had moved on so fast. I had always felt like she hadn't been as sensitive to my feelings when she started dating David. Now I understood that to her, she wasn't grieving a love lost. She was just continuing the path she was already on. It made sense, but it didn't make it easier to accept. I didn't talk to my mom about what I had learned. I didn't see the point. What was I supposed to say? That I was upset she had been ready to leave my dad before he died? That wouldn't change anything. But knowing this made me more aware of how she saw our family. It explained why she pushed for me to take David's name. To her, the past was something she had already moved on from, so why was I still holding on to it? Not long after my mom married David, she started suggesting I take his last name. At first, it was just casual comments, things like, "Wouldn't it be nice if we all had the same last name?" Or, "It would make things easier if we were officially one family." Then it became more direct. She and David even brought up adoption, saying he could legally become my father. I said no. Not because I had a problem with David, but because I didn't want to change who I was. My last name was Jones. It wasn't just a name, it was my connection to my dad, to my family, to a part of me that didn't just disappear when my mom remarried. To their credit, they didn't push. They seemed to accept my answer and moved on. At least, that's what I thought. Over the years, my mom gradually started calling me by David's last name. It wasn't all the time, but it happened often enough that I noticed. Sometimes she would introduce me to someone as Mia Smith. Other times, she'd sign me up for things under Smith instead of Jones. If a relative referred to us as Smith Jones, she would correct them and say just Smith. At first, I thought it was just a mistake. Maybe she wasn't thinking about it. But the more it happened, the more I realized that she wasn't just forgetting. She was making a choice. I corrected her when I could, but she always brushed it off. "It's not a big deal," she would say. "You're part of this family, so it makes sense." But it was a big deal to me. I had already told her no. Why was she still acting like my last name had changed when it hadn't? At first, I tried to ignore it. Maybe my mom really didn't mean anything by it. Maybe it was just a habit, something she did without thinking. But as time went on, it became harder to believe that. One time, we were at a school event, and she introduced me to another parent as Mia Smith. I corrected her right away, saying, "Actually, it's Mia Jones." She laughed awkwardly and said, "Oh, right, I forget sometimes." But how could she forget my own name? Then there was my aunt's wedding. When she sent out invitations, she listed us as the Smith-Jones family. My mom called her and told her to change it to just Smith. My aunt pushed back, saying, "But Mia's last name is Jones." My mom sighed and said, "Yes, but we just go by Smith." My aunt let it go, but I didn't. I was sitting right there when it happened. Later, I asked my mom why she did that. She just said, "It's easier this way." Easier for who? It certainly wasn't easier for me. It made me feel like she was trying to erase part of who I was. It wasn't just introductions and RSVPs. There were moments at home, too. Sometimes when she was calling me from another room, she'd use my full name, but not my actual full name. Instead of Mia Jones, she'd say Mia Smith. I reminded her again and again that my last name was Jones. She would apologize or wave it off, but nothing changed. At this point, it wasn't just frustrating. It was starting to feel deliberate. For a while, I kept letting it go. I told myself it wasn't worth turning into a fight. But then my mom did something that I couldn't ignore. She ordered this custom-made Family by Heart tree. It was this decorative piece with all our names on it, representing our family. She was excited about it, showing me the design before it arrived. But when I looked at it, I immediately noticed something wrong. Under my name, it didn't say Mia Jones. It said Mia Smith. I stared at it, waiting for her to correct herself, to say it was a mistake. When she didn't, I pointed it out. "Mom, my name is wrong." She frowned and said, "No, it's not." That's when I felt something snap inside me. I wasn't just being brushed off this time. She was actively telling me that the way I identify myself was incorrect. "I don't like being called Smith," I said, trying to stay calm. "I'm a Jones." She sighed like I was making a big deal out of nothing. "What difference does it make? You're still a Smith, too." That was it. I couldn't hold back anymore. "No, I'm not," I said. "I'm a Jones or even a Johnson like you were before, but I'm not a Smith." She looked annoyed now. "Why don't you want to use the family name?" "I do have a family name. My family name. And you need to accept that." That's when David walked in. He could tell we were fighting, and he immediately looked concerned. "What's going on?" Mom turned to him, frustrated. "She's upset because I put her name as Smith on the family tree." David looked at me and then back at her. His expression changed slightly, and I could see he wasn't comfortable with how this was going. "Maybe we should talk about this later, when things are calmer," he suggested. I agreed. Mom just crossed her arms and muttered, "Fine." But I knew this wasn't over. A couple of days passed, and I thought maybe the argument was done. Maybe my mom had finally realized how important this was to me. But then I overheard her talking to David about it in the kitchen. "She's being ridiculous," she said. "She is a Smith, whether she likes it or not." I stepped into the room before I could stop myself. "No, I'm not," I said firmly. Mom sighed, clearly frustrated. "Mia, you're making a bigger deal out of this than it needs to be." I shook my head. "No, I'm not. You keep calling me something I'm not. You keep ignoring me when I tell you I don't want that last name." David tried to step in, his voice calm. "Mia, I understand that this is upsetting you. But I won't lie. It does hurt a little that you don't want the name. I looked at him, feeling a little guilty. It's not about you. I like you, David. You're a good stepdad. But my name is part of who I am, and I don't want to change that. Mom still wasn't letting it go. Your last name still goes on all the official documents, so what's the big deal? Why does it matter if I say Smith sometimes? Because it's not my name, I said, my voice a little sharper now. It's like you're pretending Dad never existed, like my whole life before you married David doesn't count. She threw up her hands. That's not what I'm doing. Then why do you have such a problem calling me Jones? David looked between us, tense. Maybe we should all just take a break. Mom didn't answer. She just stared at me, annoyed. I wasn't trying to start a fight. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I just wanted my mom to respect something that I had made clear mattered to me. But she didn't see it that way. To her, I was just being difficult. The next time it came up, it wasn't even me who started it. My mom and David were talking in the living room, and I happened to walk in just as she said, "She's just a kid. She doesn't get to tell me what to do." I froze in place for a second before speaking. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm telling you to stop calling me something I'm not. She turned to me, arms crossed. Mia, you're part of this family. I don't understand why you're fighting so hard against being a Smith. I sighed, already exhausted. Because I'm not fighting against anything. I'm just keeping the name I already have. The name I was born with. The name Dad gave me. David sat forward, his voice softer. We thought you'd want to be part of the family name. I am part of this family, I said, looking at both of them. Having a different last name doesn't change that. You guys decided to take the same name. That's fine. But I already had mine and I want to keep it. Mom shook her head. You're making this a bigger deal than it is. I clenched my jaw. Am I? Or are you the one making it a big deal by refusing to just let me be a Jones? She sighed heavily, like she was done arguing. You're overreacting. I looked at David. You accepted it, right? He hesitated for a second before nodding. I did. It just stings a little, that's all. I understood that, but it still didn't change how I felt. Mom, on the other hand, wasn't done. I just don't get why you don't want to be a Smith, she muttered. I exhaled sharply. Because I already have a last name. She didn't answer, but I could see she wasn't happy. For a while, no one said anything. The tension in the room was thick, like everyone was waiting for the other to back down. But I wasn't going to. Mom shook her head, more to herself than to me. I don't see why this bothers you so much. I crossed my arms. Then maybe you should listen when I tell you. Her eyes narrowed slightly. It's just a name, Mia. No, I said firmly. It's my name, and I don't understand why you care so much about changing it. She groaned in frustration. Because we're a family. Families share names. It's part of being a unit. I took a breath, trying to stay calm. But I'm not stopping us from being a family. You're the only one who seems to think my last name is an issue. David rubbed his face, clearly exhausted by the whole thing. I don't think anyone's trying to hurt anyone here, he said carefully. I think your mom just wants to feel like we're all connected. I turned to him. We are connected. By love, by time, by our relationships, not by a last name. He nodded slightly, but my mom wasn't convinced. I just don't get why you're so against it. I sighed, my patience wearing thin. Because I don't want to feel like I have to erase a part of my life just because you moved on from it. That hit something. Her expression changed for a moment, but she recovered quickly. That's not what I'm doing. Then stop acting like I don't have the name I do have. Another silence. This time, it felt final. Mom turned away, shaking her head. I don't want to talk about this anymore. Fine. But that didn't mean I was going to stop fighting for my own name. Later that night, my mom came into my room. I could tell by the way she stood in the doorway that she wasn't here to apologize. I think you owe me an apology, she said. I looked up from my phone. For what? For telling me what I can and can't do, she said, crossing her arms. I'm your mother. I don't need permission to call you by my family's name. I sat up straighter, my frustration bubbling up again. You don't need permission to call yourself whatever you want. But you do need to respect my name. I already told you I don't want it changed. She sighed, looking at me like I was being unreasonable. I just don't see why this has to be such a fight. Because you keep making it one. She frowned, like she didn't expect me to push back so directly. I just want us to feel like one family. We are one family, I said. A last name doesn't change that. You're my mom. David's my stepdad. Emma and Noah are my siblings. That's not going to change, no matter what my last name is. She didn't say anything at first. Then, softer, she said, It just hurts that you don't want to be included. I shook my head. I'm not excluding myself. You're the one acting like my name means I'm less a part of this family. She exhaled sharply. So, you won't apologize? No, I said simply, because I'm not wrong. She stared at me for a moment, then turned and left without another word. I wasn't sure if this was over, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to back down. After everything, I started wondering if I had been too harsh. Maybe I could have handled it differently. Maybe I should have just let it go. But every time I tried to justify it in my head, I came back to the same thing. It was my name. Not my mom's. Not David's. Mine. And no one should have to fight to keep something that already belongs to them. It wasn't like I was rejecting my family. I love my mom. I respect David. I adore my younger siblings. I never said I wasn't part of them. I just didn't think sharing a last name should be the thing that defines us as a family. I tried to explain that to my mom. I tried to tell her that family isn't about matching names or appearances. It's about love, about relationships, about how we treat each other. And yet, she kept acting like I was pushing her away just because I didn't want to be called Mia Smith. David at least seemed to understand, even if he was a little hurt. He never tried to force the issue. He just admitted that it stung. And I could live with that. I never wanted to hurt anyone, but I also wasn't going to change myself just to make things easier for them. So here I am, telling this story, because I genuinely don't know if I handled it the right way. I stood my ground, but did I do it the wrong way? Should I have just let my mom call me Smith and ignored it? Should I have apologized, even though I still don't think I did anything wrong? Or was I right to insist on keeping my name, even if it upset her? I really don't know. So, what do you think? Am I the jerk here?